So in this webinar, Avi and I are going to talk about how this journey is changing, what are the priorities that are happening, what do you do if you're an incumbent in the space, and what do you do if you're a challenger in the space? There's opportunities for both. The ground hasn't been lost yet, but we don't have a lot of time, so hopefully we'll create some urgency for you guys. But let me introduce myself. I'm Lora Kratchounova, founder of Scratch Marketing and Media. We're a B2B tech marketing agency based out of Boston. Been around for 16 years plus, and we specialize in the deeper tech of the space: cloud, networking, data, AI, pipelines, those kinds of fun things on our side. And over to Avi.
Hey, Laura, thanks. So Avi here from Trendemon. We turned the website from a static asset into an agentic seller, which is some of the stuff we're going to be discussing today. But essentially, as attention is dropping, people are looking for contextual experiences and answers without speaking to sales. And this is something that we can help with in terms of turning the website into a contextual asset and an answer engine.
Awesome. Okay, so I guess we start with a little bit of a provocative statement because the world has been shaped by the leaders in the space. And now, probably more than ever, incumbents have the most to lose and the most to defend, actually. So, what we are finding is that the level playing field is changing, and the large language models are actually redefining how brands show up through the way that they summarize information, through the way that they prioritize it. We as brand leaders are no longer in control. So if you are sort of thinking about, well, if I'm an incumbent, what do I need to do? You'll hear Abby and I talk about sort of you have to show up on both fronts, both externally, how much are you visible within the LLMs? How can you benchmark yourself against the competitors? But also what you do on your own website, which is the core of what we're talking about here. But I think those things go hand in hand. And we'll actually have a hands-on demo from Avi on their product called Signal that helps us sort of bridge the divide between external and internal. And then if you're a challenger brand, for the first time, you don't have to have millions of dollars to outspend your competitors. You can actually be smart about how you introduce the LLMs into your GTM. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next few slides. Avi, anything from your side before we move on?
No, sounds good.
So this is one of my favorite slides this year. This came through our friends in Infuse. We're both friends with them, both on the Trendemon side and the Scratch Marketing side. And they do this voice of the buyer study every year. And I personally am super excited when I get my hands on it. So this year, what the interesting part is here, and again, if we think about the audience behind this, these are enterprises globally. These are not SMBs that are reflected in here. What this new study from Infuse found is that the market is in transition, and there's a lot of people who are looking to switch vendors at this point. So no one's position is safe across the board. So kind of with this backdrop, we also thought about, well, kind of what's driving that. And some of this is, sort of over-promising and under-delivering, which I think is a core point of what we are going to talk about in terms of impactful content that we can develop on our own websites in our answer-led kind of journey to make sure that we are actually perceived with credibility, because that kind of becomes the new credibility value prop, if you will. The other thing that this research confirmed, which again was an interesting finding from last year, we knew that, but this is very interesting, is that if you show up as on the initial list of vendors that enterprises are considering, you'll probably end up being on this list. So the old playbook of saying, well, maybe we can wait for the prospects to raise their hand and start researching and showing intent, that is too late for that to happen. And this is why we need to be on the offensive, both with the LLM visibility and discovery. And we'll share with you research that came from Trendemon, and we helped analyze and push to market, which is also super interesting and exciting. So we'll share some data around that. But we'll get to that next. So just from kind of what our position is on this for incumbents, you cannot, count on where you are today. You can become the default, but not necessarily the definition. So this essentially can become the new risk. The way that we have invested in our brands as kind of the leaders in the space can become a predicament, because that's not how the LLMs consume content, and the challengers have an ability to kind of nibble at our feet. Um, Challengers can define what good looks like for the next wave. So that's something to think about as category definitions are changing across the board. We're seeing that challengers have actually an advantage in here. And then from a competitive messaging, I think the most interesting part here is that if you have more generic category language, what happens is the LLMs are shaping the perception of your brand, and you are not. All right, so where are we now? I guess we'll talk a little bit more about the research next, but these are some of the core findings from looking at Trendemon's data. Over 220 million interactions on their website, correct, Abby? That's about
120 million, yeah. Still good.
120. Still good, right? Thereabout. So it was what we see is happening, and it's happening much faster than we've anticipated, almost like what's happening with OpenClaw. This is what we're seeing with the customer journey as well. That discovery shifted, that content on our customers' websites is not necessarily built to answer these answer-led journeys. Meanwhile, the journeys are being compressed because what you're getting is a lot more educated buyers that are ready to make some decisions and are there to ask the right questions. These questions alone, and Abby can show you how they've implemented it on Signal, can be very informative for your GTM, for your account-based strategy, for the sales team to follow up on the right sort of buttons and make sure that the next follow-up is the best next follow-up. And
Yeah, and I think
essentially, yeah, go ahead.
no. So I think that just in terms of, when we talked about this, Laura, before about why there's urgency to act, is that I think for the first time we are seeing disruption in several dimensions. There are things that are changing simultaneously on different levels, and they're changing at a very fast pace. And so instead of kind of waiting for things to happen and to settle, you have to take a proactive stance. And we're going to be talking about this through the data lens, right? So we're going to be sharing why do we say that these things are disrupted through the stats that we're seeing, through this information that we're seeing. And just to put it into context of where we're getting this information. So we're working with B2B customers, anywhere from, 6 Sense and Checkpoint and Tenable, cybersecurity tech. A lot of our customers that use Trendemon give us kind of a wide angle view of how B2B buyer journeys are changing. And that allows us to kind of look at it from a kind of wider perspective and see those shifts. And those shifts are very dramatic. And they are taking different, I'd say, directions than we've previously seen. I think this is what is exciting and frightening at the same time, that there are things that are happening in different directions. Some of them are even counterintuitive. We're going to be talking about them in a couple of slides. But the bottom line is that there's so much change happening into the places where discovery happens, and we're going to talk about that. And there are changes that happen to how buyers buy and their behavior on the buying journey. So this is kind of why we felt, we need to get this information out. We want to have this conversation, going onto what marketers and GTM teams should be doing to adapt to this new reality.
Yep. So I guess one of the interesting things here, I think that we're seeing is that because we've all seen the zero-click phenomenon happen across the board in Google AI overviews, we are seeing marketers actually compensating by spending a lot more on paid channels. And that's kind of what the data confirmed in here. As you can see, like LinkedIn paid traffic is up, increasing paid sources. And then, not that surprisingly, Google paid is kind of going in the other direction. So what we are trying to do as marketers is we're trying to compensate for this new world. And at some point, the economics of these new worlds are going to start to break if they haven't,
Exactly.
um, completely broken down for you already. And I know that we talked about this, like leads are obviously hard to get at this point. The whole idea of MQL, SQL, I think becomes a little bit more obsolete here as well.
So yeah, this is like a knee-jerk reaction, right? Of marketers seeing their traditional traffic, maybe through SEO, drop, and then having to compensate, as you mentioned, and having to go to paid. But the unit economics will eventually make it to a point where it's unsustainable. I think for many companies right now, it's unsustainable. So there has to be a different way of thinking about this. There has to be a very dramatic paradigm shift, as opposed to, okay, so we dropped organic, so we go with paid. We're just seeing that as not something that companies can sustain over long periods of time.
And to that point, I think the buyers are changing.
Yeah.
Maybe they're the same buyers, but they've changed the way that they obviously consume and think about the space. And I'm sure that all of us have experienced this in our own work. We don't necessarily go to websites anymore. We start in Perplexity usually, or Claude or ChatGPT. So there's no surprise in terms of the unique visitor drop that we're seeing per account, the fewer sessions as well, because buyers are educating in other places. And what's interesting is I also came across some research that was shared in the Exit 5 community yesterday. The interesting part about the buying community is maybe there's fewer people, but what's happening is now the buying committee is not only internally within the company, like this buying committee is external peers, folks who have had experience, Slack groups where people are sharing their experiences. So that was an interesting finding. And
And just
then,
maybe just
yep.
before that, maybe on the previous slide, one of the things that we've been doing this buyer journey study for the past 5 years. And every year we've seen kind of maybe a continuing or similar trend of the growth of the buying, right? The buying group has been growing. The journey length has been growing. The number of content consumed has been growing. That has been year over year. And then in 2025, for the first time, we've seen a reversal. We've seen a smaller buying group. We've seen the buying group read less pages, but and not to give anything away later, we've seen some dramatic changes in the conversion rates. And so this is why we're saying there are some kind of some dramatic shifts in the behavior of the buying group. And we're going to be talking about why that is happening and what should marketers be doing in order to adapt to this.
So maybe Avi, you can also talk to this that there's low volume at this point, but the volume is actually of very high quality.
Yeah, and I think that so we talk about two things that are happening. One is this migration of our buyers to outside of our website. So the discovery stage of many buyers has migrated, which means that they're doing their discovery off the traditional websites. And they're trusting more and more of that discovery process. But then when they reach the website, they come in a lot more educated. They come in a lot more intentful. And so they pretty much have narrowed down their shortlist at that stage, which is why we are seeing them convert and a lot more at a lot higher percentages than before. But this is kind of something that is really strange and interesting to see. You see a lot of this top of funnel, right? That we've been traditionally trying to build everything on our sites and trying to get them through SEO and through a lot of the stuff that's moving away. But when they get into our site, we see a lot of high intent and very specific questions and needs that they want to be answered in that decision process. So yeah, this is definitely some of those interesting trends that we've been seeing.
Yep, I think that this is kind of the survival of the fittest point that we wanted to make on this slide, right? That
Yep.
if once people land now on our websites, obviously the websites still have a huge role to play, and that's what we're talking today. But if you don't continue with these contextual experience, I think we're breaking the flow for folks, and that is costing us a lot. And then what we have found, and mostly through Trendemon's work with the enterprise customers that Avi mentioned is that once you start kind of directing the buyer through the right journey, once you know what content is already converting, and you can think through how you can serve that content based on the journeys that people follow, you can see much higher engagement and you can see much higher conversions. I think Avi, you can maybe talk to that as well.
Yeah, because we talked about AI as being a filter, right? Because when we think about it, LLMs, what they enable us, and not just as buyers or sellers, but as humans, is to ingest huge amounts of information, to process it, and to provide us a contextual answer to what we care about. In that process, now, what I've described is essentially a B2B buying process, right? I have a certain need. I give the LLM my context, my background through my interaction. Then I give it the information and tell it, okay, which of those solutions would you recommend? And so when people listen to the LLM and then visit, they come at those higher intents. They come a lot more with specific questions and needs, and so they convert higher if we are able to answer this question. And this is where we see the biggest gap, because the website's role traditionally has been, it had several roles up until just recently. One is attracting traffic, general traffic, right? Think of general SEO. So anybody who's remotely even relevant, you want to bring them in. Then we had this notion of let's convert them into leads, right? Let's get them to leave their contact information. So let's gate things and let's find ways to get them to fill their contact information. Let's find ways to de-anonymize them, et cetera, et cetera. So that was another function of that side. And then lastly, is really to support their decision-making process. Now, when you think about roles 1 and 2, just attracting traffic and converting into leads, this has been kind of deteriorating very rapidly. The website, the B2B website, has a little a capability of just attracting general, inquirers. A lot of this kind of high-level information can be consumed through the LLMs. Same thing goes for leads. We know the roles of the leads. We talked about the depth of the MQL a lot extensively. I think it's very clear. So what we're left with is, does my website answer my buyers' questions? And can it help align with their actual needs? And this is where a lot of websites are still failing, because a lot of them still provide pretty much static experiences, static pages that require the visitor to read a lot of content, to process that content, and then to reach a conclusion. And that is kind of contradictory to their experiences outside, right? In the LLM, they tell it what they want. They expect the LLM to understand that and to provide them an answer. And so now there's this disconnect between the external experience and the internal experience on the website.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we talked a little bit about that already. Of why do we need to start thinking absolutely differently about our websites, and how do we introduce what Avi mentioned? First, the experience of maybe summarizing what content we have on the website, so it's a lot easier to scan, and people can make the right choices of where they want to go next. But also, kind of, why do we need to also provide them with the opportunity to ask questions of our content, our company, our knowledge base? So I don't know that we need to spend any more time on this at this point. Of kind of now, hopefully, we've convinced you that that's the case. What's interesting is, and you'll see, and Avi and I talked about this, the research from Infuse talks about people consuming a lot more content. And again, some of this is maybe happening outside of our websites and then on the websites themselves. But it's interesting that content continues to play a key role. The question is, how do we flex it now to also provide these Answer-Led journeys that are happening on the website? So that, again, sort of the trusted content component is key. And of course, the good old rules of marketing still apply, and maybe even more so today than at any point, is that we need to know our buyers, we need to know their hot buttons, we need to talk their language instead of using AI to produce AI slop that goes nowhere. So we talked about sort of these Answer-Led journeys, and now we're going to go into more of like how we see this coming together. Scratch is launching our offering on Signal today, which is the Trendemon product. So I wanted Avi to show you this. But again, I just wanted to stress the importance of external discoverability happening with the internal answer engine efforts that we're going to show you today, because these two go hand in hand. And it's important to not over-index on one and then forget about the other. So I think this is kind of the core urgency that we wanted to communicate to you guys, is that please don't do just one. Just look at this a little bit more cohesively and look from both sides of the equation.
Yeah, I think we talked about those two interconnected fronts, right, Laura? We talked about the external front that you have to win, the internal front, and they're interconnected
Very
in the sense
interconnected.
that your internal stance, your internal content, the proof points that you have on your first or second party assets are critical for how you will be presented outside. And outside is critical for traffic or buyers even being aware of your existence. And so this isn't something that can be done in a staggered way. It has to be done parallel. And like we said, it's interconnected, so they affect each other. And this is why this partnership and our joint offering, I think, are so powerful, because they address both of these challenges and opportunities head on at the same time: the external discoverability, the internal answer stance of your company, and really kind of bringing you up to speed into this new buyer reality.
Avi, do you want to share your screen now and I stop sharing? How do we want to do this here? Because I think you wanted to show folks the product itself.
Yeah, I think we wanted to show the audience what we think about when we talk about transforming the website, your owned asset, into an agentic seller, what that actually means. Also, happy to take some questions about, we've been hearing a lot of marketers think or have these questions about the accuracy, hallucinations. We know, we're using LLMs, so we know that they can invent things. We want to make sure that whatever we're putting out is accurate, is grounded. And so happy to share how we're addressing some of those things. But I think also it really is about, beyond the product or any piece of technology, it is really about rethinking the GTM process. And I think this is maybe the bottom line here. GTM is rapidly transforming, being disrupted, all of those terms that you want to use. And you have certain assets and levers that you need to now get up to speed in order for them to support this new GTM. Again, there are opportunities, not just from, hey, we have LLMs, but what does it mean from a GTM lens? And I think this is really the change, because you can have a lot of answer engines, right? You can spin up and we talk to some companies that say, hey, we'll build this internally. Great. But when you think about what's the mission here isn't to build just an answer engine. It's to build a GTM agent, something that can guide your buyers, can move them, essentially take the role of a seller and put it on your website. This is what you're trying to achieve. Not just to be, a search box that provides static answers. So this is kind of how we're thinking about this and what we see our customers do and how they're leveraging it. So yeah, happy to share some maybe a short example of how that actually looks like in real
Sure.
life.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to make sure that we sort of touch upon kind of what the structure is, and then we have some examples, but maybe at this point it's good for you to share, Avi.
Yeah, definitely.
Show the.
So Scratch and Trendemon, we have a joint offer for promoting for using Trendemon Signal, which is our agentic answer engine, which can turn the website into a contextual, grounded seller that can answer your buyer's question on site. Essentially, we talked about the experience on the LLM, right? You ask a question in context and you want to get a contextual answer. You want to be able to continue that process on your website as well. Now, one of the things that enable us to do this is that we connect and we have signal, we have buying signals. We know the company the visitor is from. We know their buying journey. We know which content they've read. And so when a visitor has an interaction on the website, we can take that into consideration and continue that conversation. So what you're seeing here is just a demonstration website of Trendemon. This unit here is the embedded version of Trendemon Signal, which includes a summary of that page, a contextual summary. It includes a question and answer dialogue, and it can be also used in as overlay. So you can basically put it on various pages on your site. The other thing, apart from just answering questions is providing questions, which is where we think is going to be the next kind of frontier, which isn't just how well does my answer engine answer my buyer's question, but can we suggest the best next question? Because remember, at the end of the day, our mission here isn't just to be static and passive. Is think of a seller, right? They need to guide a buyer. They need to help them understand if it's a good fit for them, and to recommend even questions. So this is what we do here. We have what we call common questions, which are essentially guiding questions, which are based off of the insights that we have on which content is converting, on the audience, on the specific visitor. And again, we look at our role or the seller's role as a guide, right? It has to guide your buyers. So this is just from the front end experience. I think what's exciting is really the back end, which is the ability to automatically ingest all the content on your website. You can define for which areas of your website Trendemon Single gets this content, and you can configure it. And the reason it's important is because a lot of time hallucinations or bad answers come, guess what, from bad content. Maybe I have some old content on my site. If the LLM ingests it, it thinks it doesn't have a way to understand if it's relevant or not relevant. It looks at it as a source of information. So you want to be able to control which content the engine is using to provide answers. So that's the first level. The second level is to create a grounded or a gold standard of answers and grounding questions. And so Trendemon automatically generates those grounding questions. And together with Scratch, we can provide an answer audit that basically says, well, does this answer the question correctly? Or do we have some content gaps or scanning gaps that we need to address? Once those questions are approved, they can be grounding questions as well. So they can be guiding questions as well, sorry. So these are just some of these examples of how to really use your website and your first party content as a platform to first evaluate your answer posture. And the reason that's important, well, guess what? When an LLM crawls your website and it looks at this page, it can also scan this summary, which is really effective for it. So it can help with the external discoverability and GEO. But more importantly, when somebody asks a question on your company or your product and the LLM comes to your website, you can then understand whether the LLM will answer it correctly through this process of grounding questions. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I don't want to dive too much into
I do want you to show folks how it Signal enables sales, because I think it's very interesting. Like it can work in an ABM sort of a setup when you can see which accounts are coming to your website. You can see what kinds of questions people from the buying committee are asking. So I love that the answer-led.
I was just going to say, while we were looking for this, Lora and Avi, we have a question from the audience. If you can maybe elaborate a little bit on, in terms of content gaps, what are the typical content gaps in terms of stage in the funnel or type of asset or type of questions? We know from industry studies that it's things around ROI, perhaps some comparisons. But what things have you observed, and then how would any enterprise go about sort of identifying these content gaps?
Yep, maybe I can start and then Avi can elaborate on this. Because we talked about this new journey of discovery starting in the LLMs, especially if you are a challenger brand, our recommendation is to focus on mid and bottom of the funnel content, because that's what people are focused on. And guess what? We usually, if we do a good job as product marketers, we know our customers, we know the questions that they're asking, right? We know the top sales objections, but guess what? Maybe integrations are top of mind for account A, whereas customer support is more important for account B. That's where the types of questions that people are asking can be captured in this interface that Avi is showing you, so you can understand kind of what the hot buttons are for each account, and then you can equip sales to obviously double down on that.
Yeah, I completely agree, Laura. I think that if we think about the new buying journey, right, and we understand that the center of gravity has shifted from, top, middle, bottom. Now it's middle and bottom. And you think about what are the key questions that they will be asking. The key questions we see come up on our customers' websites is around competitors and comparisons and evaluations, because when they come in, they traditionally want to understand, you're in my short lists. Now I need to justify why you and not, that other player. And so the main content gaps that we see is that there isn't enough information, and not just information, and this is maybe the most critical point here, is there's not enough proof. And what LLMs know and understand is how to evaluate proof. Now, if you claim something and you don't provide proof, the LLM will discount it. And it doesn't matter how many pages you've written about it. So the more proof you can provide, the more robust the answer will be. And I think these are the key content gaps that we're seeing traditionally when companies come and we do this analysis. And just in terms of the buying journey itself, this is why we call it signal, because we now have today, and what I'm showing here is a visualization of the buying journey. Now, let's say we have somebody who's identified in our HubSpot or in our Marketo, and they visit our site. We can now see which questions they've asked. If they're not in our HubSpot or Marketo as a known contact, we can still de-anonymize them through company level, and we can see which companies, visitors from companies have asked these questions. Now, these are what we call the highest fidelity signals you can ask for. And to your point, Lora, this is why account executives love this so much, because it doesn't just show a journey, or it doesn't just show that a certain visitor from some company has visited the website. It actually shows what they were asking, and this really is, I think, really impactful, not just for the AEs, but also, of course, for the marketing team to really understand what that account cares about, to, at the end of the day, prioritize, which is really what you're trying to do, because you're trying to, out of all these different ICPs that are visiting, you're trying to create a prioritized list for your sellers, for your AEs, to understand, okay, these are the highest probability. Focus your time, allocate your time, prioritize your time on these accounts, as opposed to, everything else that you think could be going on. So you can see the question. What we're showing here is what was the question asked, what was the answer, what was the follow-up. And again, this can be pushed through Slack, through Salesforce, through email to your sales representatives, and not just as a single journey, but in the lens of the entire company's journey. So when we look at this view, this is a report that your AEs can get, which basically says, here is what this company has been doing and asking on your website. This is number of visitors, visits. This is an AI summary of what they care about, and of course, how their journey looks like and the questions they were asking. This is the future, in our view, of B2B GTM, right? It's that type of interaction that needs to happen, and it just converts more. We see the data. We've shared the data about the higher conversion rates of those experiences.
Exactly. So this is why we're excited. Now I'm going to share my screen back again and move it in slideshow. That we have sort of different levels of engagement here. If you wanted to start with us on the awareness level and answer the question, are we even ready, and to what extent? That's quick because, as Avi showed you, their technology can generate the questions, and then we can, because we have the domain expertise, we can take a look at them and make sure that everything is working, because we still believe that you need to keep the human in the loop. Super important. And then we have a 90-day activation plan. So we prioritize the gaps, both externally and on the website content-wise, that we can develop. And there's different ways that Signal, for example, can consume the content. It's not just your pages, but it can also feed it your knowledge base, and it can get the answers from that. So there could be multiple different sources. Because sometimes, not everyone is comfortable doing a competitor comparison, right? It doesn't necessarily fit. Some brands are comfortable with that. Others don't find it as a part of their kind of ethos to do that sort of comparison. And there's ways to go around this as well. And then from there, how do we scale both this external and internal motion that we talked about? So that's where we are. And if you guys are interested, we do have a special offer for the first 3 customers. So raise your hand. We have the contact information to start with the assessment. we can do this pretty quickly on both sides. We can also consider, because the Signal right now scans about 100 pages. I think that Avi was gracious enough to say, hey, if we have someone who has a little bit more, we'll do it as part of the assessment and then share the results back with the community. So that's sort of what's involved in the assessment. Then on the activation side, these are essentially the 4 steps. We do the content mapping, we do the Answer QI workshop with our customers jointly with Trendemon, obviously. We help rewrite or write content for the top 20 to 50 buyer questions. We deploy that. We make sure that it works. And as Abby mentioned, they have spent a ton of time making sure that their model behind this is not hallucinating. So far, we haven't come across any hallucination. So amazing job on that front. It is trustworthy. And then we track and we make sure that everything's working on that end. And just quickly, why us? We're sort of best of both worlds, I guess, is we do have, especially in the B2B tech space, pretty deep domain expertise. So that's where we come in. We're also early on the LLM discovery and kind of seeing what's out there and talking to a lot of people, which I'm incredibly grateful for the LLM tool community, because without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. And you learn every day and they test new functionality every day. And we work with multiple of them. External insert control, as I mentioned, we think we have a pretty robust process on that. And then a lot of times we also bring in the competitive angle because nothing should be done in vacuum. So that's kind of the 3 pillars from the Scratcher side. And Abby can talk to what Trendemon brings to the table.
Yeah, just to the last point, Laura, which I think is really exciting, and also to get the folks thinking about this, and I think this is what you guys are doing really well, is to understand that as these shifts are happening, it opens up new attack opportunities. Right? I know it sounds a bit militant these days, but maybe it's it's the
world psyche is there.
Exactly. We're thinking only on how to attack and defend, but what that means is that if you're a challenger or even as incumbent, you're going to have these new attack surfaces. You're going to have these new vulnerabilities that through external scanning you can uncover. And when you're looking at beating the competition, this is really important to understand where the soft belly of your competition is. And this is really what Scratch can really do. It's not just say, hey, here are your gaps, let's close them. But here are your competitive advantages that your competitor isn't really, capitalizing on. Even if, they could be good at something, but they're not, describing it, or they're not providing enough content on it. Guess what? It's still a vulnerability that you can take advantage of. And so this is why we're saying this is a dual front kind of challenge there. From our side, it really is kind of, I would say, securing your position in the sense that, first of all, understanding your own vulnerabilities, where your content is lacking, where your proof is lacking, and where LLMs are not providing good answers. And what we always say to customers is, look, if after we've scanned all of your website and the LLM still provides a shitty answer, well, guess what? Your content, you have a problem in your content, right? It's not the LLM's fault. You need to go back and you have to address those weak points. And then at the end of the day, it's not just about being a service agent, right? That provides a good, adequate answer from a support stance. It is a GTM agent. It has to move buyers forward. It has to be accountable. And we look at a website and the content as sellers that are evaluated. And I think the thing that we found is that it's not like all the work that we've done previously doesn't matter. Actually, the opposite. So we have content attribution to understand which content drives deals. We now use this insight in order to generate questions based on the content that converts. Because at the end of the day, you have an interaction of a human with some piece of data, some piece of information, and you want to optimize that interaction. It happened previously through a person reading a page, and then moving forward. Now it's happening through a person asking a question and then deciding, pass or fail.
Indeed. So if you're ready, you can go to our new page on Agentic Answer-Led GTM, and you can learn more about Signal at the URL below. So we are open for questions or opinions or experiences that you guys want to share. So by all means, don't be shy. Peter, any additional questions from the folks on the line?
You can just invent something. Nobody knows, right? So you can just say,
But we also
no,
can't hear you. If you're talking, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
But we want to be mindful of people's time. We really appreciate it. I'm always excited about the fact that, in this day and age where people have such short attention span, people have been with us for 45 minutes, which is crazy. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So really, really thank you all for sticking around.
It's all you. But speaking of reading, we also have a couple of different resources here. So if you're interested, we'll obviously make this available to everyone. But by all means, you can snap a photo and then access some of these resources, including the report that Avi and I talked about based on 122 million journey points on Trendemon. Peter, any questions? I don't know that Peter is on the line.
I see a few questions.
I don't see any questions in the chat, but please.
I don't know. I see two. I see two questions. Maybe
there you go. Yeah, I'm seeing them now.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
If you don't mind, just going for it. Yes.
For teams that are just starting to see the shift in their own data, what is the first thing you'd actually change in your GTM approach to become more answer-led? Laura, do you want to take this?
I think we start with this assessment, right? This is the whole point of Signal. We can automatically take a look and see where the gaps are. And the whole idea of after doing this for a week or two, when we kind of scan the pages, see what's working, look at the competitors again, not a huge process. We can see where the gaps are and start prioritizing for the biggest impact. And again, ideally, as we do that, we kind of figure out what's important to your buyer's journey. Then we take that externally, we benchmark against, where we are and some of the top competitors so that these two things work together. As Avi said, it's a continuous journey, right? If you start in the LLM, you want to continue on the website. So they're connected as part of the same kind of experience. So that's how we think about that. But you start with an assessment that gives you a sense of where you are. It gives you at least directional benchmarks at this point, because, it's not a precise science. Models are probabilistic. As much as we try to mimic how they provide answers, that's not usually the case, but that's how we would recommend you start.
Yeah. We have an answer about the product. Can you share more on the embedded AI function, which pages is available for clients, etc.? So yeah, this is part of Trendemon Signal. It's the ability to add basically this answer engine, either embedded or overlay on different pages. And through our partnership with Scratch, it's offered to Scratch clients and to people who are looking to not only add a unit. This is why we're saying there has to be a human in the loop that will assess whether those answers are good or not, right? It isn't just about a widget or a tool. And this is coming in from a tech vendor. I'm saying the tool is not going to answer those problems. You're going to have a human that will really understand and assess what we call the answer posture of your company, and then make those adjustments and decisions. Laura, do you want to talk about how long the assessment period to execution is?
You say 1 to 2 weeks. It can take 3 weeks, but this is not a long process. It's how fast can we get going sometimes on the customer side. If you're already a customer of Trendemon and Scratch, obviously the process is much faster. But it's not a long period of time, usually 2 to 3 week stops.
Yep. And you'll be amazed at the stuff we learned just from the grounding questions process. I mean, you'd be surprised at sometimes how very fundamental questions about your company, your product, your offering just get completely skewed because of either legacy content, because the LLMs will not scan all of your website's content when they provide an answer. If they hit on an old page, and they will spew it up. And so these are things that are relatively easy, very easy to close very quickly. So you can know which, first of all, pages to deprecate or unpublish. And so there are a lot of those things. So low-hanging fruit that can really help with your external posture before we go into kind of the more expensive and extensive activities there. Hopefully that wasn't too scary. I mean, we're trying to. I mean, look, we're all learning things as we go, and things are changing very dramatically, very quickly. But I think inaction is not an option at this point.
Avi, another question. Are workshops, demos available for others in my company to join to take this further as a possible opportunity?
Yeah, we're happy to take to do any demo or talk for any company. So, we'll be sharing also after this webinar the contact information. You can go on our site, our Scratch's website, and really sign up. And yeah, we love
Right, you
talking about
can.
this. We love doing this. So yeah, definitely reach out to us. Even if you're just exploring and you're not there's we see a lot of also we talked about FOMO. Now there's FOMO, fear of messing up. A lot of companies are still hesitant about either new tools or new approaches, and they still feel like they want to get a grasp of what's happening. So happy to really have an open conversation on what we're seeing from a data perspective and what as we talked in this webinar, what we feel should be steps that need to be taken now in order to really address those shifts that we're seeing in buying behavior.
Yep, 100%. We're here.
They keep coming, by the way. So there's another one. If we
That's
already have
great.
an AI tool, is there an integration possibility?
So we have different integrations. We have various integrations to other platforms and other solutions, and we also have the ability to put information out that other tools can use. For example, our content attribution, which helps understand which content performs, can be externalized, can be used as a report, or our journey data, for example. So we have customers using it either on different BI platforms or within their marketing automation or within their CRM. But again, has to be looked at the specific of it. And always the question we ask is, what is the purpose, right? What are we trying to achieve, as opposed to just have more data or just have some more interconnectivity? But really look at that mission. We view the mission as really moving buyers forward. Is this helping us or not? But again, happy to take this offline, and if there are any specific questions on specific tools, we'd be happy to answer.
So both Lora and Avi can be reached at the email addresses. We'll circulate it. Reach out to their LinkedIn profiles as well, and or connect through the websites.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you everyone for staying with us. As Avi said, more than 45 minutes at this point. Super,
And great
super
questions.
glad. Yeah, great questions for sure. Super glad that we were able to do the session, and you know where you can find us, and please don't be shy. Yeah, reach out to us. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Have a good one.
Cheers.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.